Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Nuview's brand new Wednesday webinar series. My name is Nate Hare. I am the Director of Sales here at Nuview. And I want to tell you a little bit about what we're doing going forward and what you can expect as a viewer or potentially just looking for some education from Nuview, what we're going to be doing here. So we've got a whole series of webinars that we're going to be doing live every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can watch this live on Facebook Live. You can watch this live on YouTube. If you like the content, what I would say is make sure you follow, like our pages. That way you get notifications as to when we go live again. But you can always expect that we're going to be going live every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Central Time with new topics, new speakers, new sponsors, and all sorts of new education that will help you as an investor invest and save for retirement by eliminating taxes from your life. And I think that's important for everybody to understand. So this is going to be an ongoing series. If you don't make the live viewing, don't worry. It's all of this is going to be recorded and on our Facebook page, on our YouTube channel, and also posted on our website as well. We're building an education center, so we're really ramping up the content that comes from Nuview, and this goes to clients and non-clients alike. We just want everybody to understand what's truly possible when investing your IRAs or 401ks into any type of investment. So today's topic, we're going to start right from the beginning, and we're going to jump into really what is a self-directed IRA. A lot of people have heard of it. Some people know exactly what it is, but truthfully, only about 5% of Americans really can define it. So today's subject is really just to talk about what is a self-directed IRA, what are the benefits of a self-directed IRA, why should you have one, and what kind of investments can you do within them? And what benefits to those investments do you get as an individual taxpayer? So before we get into that, though, I want to bring in our sponsor for the day. I want to thank him for coming on. It's Gregory Emmer with Equity Max. They do a lot for investors, especially here in Florida, Central Florida, Miami, all over. And I'll have him tell you a little bit about what he can do and help as far as being a real estate investor. Gregory, you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much.
And thanks for joining us. I'm going to switch to your screen here and
no
just tell them a
problem.
little bit about yourself and what you do.
Yes, if you hear noise in the background, it's because we are live at my office. Listen, first and foremost, thank you for having us. And additionally, I hopefully everyone listening to this webinar finds that really having a self-directed IRA, and specifically with Nuview, because they are a great company to work with, it's going to help you profit quicker from real estate. It's going to help you profit more from real estate. And one way that you could enhance what you hold in your self-directed IRA is to leverage that. And how do you leverage that? By utilizing a loan against what you hold in your IRA. So if you're buying a property and you don't have all of that money in your account, you could always borrow some, or rather your IRA will then borrow some. Your IRA will then make the payments to us, the lender. And then once you sell the property, all that money goes back into your self-directed IRA, and guess how much taxes you have to pay? Zero. And now more than ever, with the president potentially going to be raising capital gains taxes, if you are able to smartly invest through your self-directed IRA, you will save yourself a boatload in taxes and be able to grow your money exponentially. But beyond that, I don't know if you were going to discuss that, Nate, a little bit about us. We are a family business. We do only lend our own personal family money. We've been around 30 years. So we've seen everything, and we lend not only strategically around Florida and the major metro markets, Central Florida, the Tampa West Coast area, Jacksonville, and even South Florida, where we're from. We also lend across 46 states. And for all of you listening who may be in Florida, may not be in Florida, I encourage you, I'm sure your market's hot, to venture out into other parts of the country and see what opportunity lies ahead, because I'm sure Nuview will be able to help you out with that. Because this is a non-recourse loan as mandated by your self-directed IRA, there's no credit and no income requirements. We don't require anything to actually qualify you. We can give you a competitive rate, competitive terms, We do not require a survey or appraisal. Oftentimes, whether it's with a self-directed IRA or not, you'll find that appraisals can sometimes kill deals. Well, that's not relevant to us since we don't require them. And most importantly, since it is our own money, we are able to close very, very, very quickly. Once the title search is back, which is a standard document in closings, it's just 2 days from then to funding. And, you know, we do the easy ones, the difficult ones, and everything in the middle. So we hope to earn your business. If you're looking at the slide, you see my information, but if you're not, the phone number to reach me is my cell. You can always reach me on my cell, 954-663-5410. I again want to thank everyone at Nuview, Nate specifically, for having me, and we look forward to working with you, and we hope you find, and I hope you find their presentation informative. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Greg. And before you go, I will ask, not to put you on the spot either, but maybe one of these Wednesdays down the road, me and you do a in-depth presentation about leveraging with your non-recourse loans and buying real estate. I'd like to do that with you.
Absolutely. We would love the opportunity, and we'll chat in the coming days and weeks.
We'll chat. Awesome.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Greg.
No
enjoy
problem.
the rest of your day.
Everyone
We'll
enjoy. Okay.
Yep.
Take care.
All right. So again, we want to thank our sponsors for helping us out and put these together. You know, as Greg mentioned, he not only does hard money loans for individuals, but he has loans for IRAs. It's a great topic, one of my favorite topics to talk about, and we'll get into it a little bit. Not today. We want to stick to the basics, but if you have questions about how IRAs can borrow money, just email me directly, or I have an email address at the end that you can send that to. But let's just jump in right into today's presentation about what a self-directed IRA is and why should you have one. How does it work? What are the benefits? What are the investments you can hold within them? What are the rules that you want that govern them? The things you want to stay away from, the cautions, I would say, and all the wonderful things that you can do with an IRA. So give you a little background about Nuview Trust Company. We are a licensed and bonded trust company, trust charter out of South Dakota, but we have an office here in Longwood, Florida, that we run our administration out of. But we do serve clients all over the country and even outside of the country. So what we are is a little bit different than what most people are used to. When you talk IRAs or 401ks, usually you're thinking, okay, that's with Fidelity or Charles Schwab or, you know, Wells Fargo Advisors, somebody like that. The difference between those companies and Nuview is that those companies are licensed securities brokers that sell investments. Doesn't make them bad guys. It just means when you have your IRA administrated with those companies, they're going to limit you to the investments of what they sell, which are typically stocks, bonds, mutual funds, CDs. We call those traditional investments. Nuview has the same IRA because IRAs are all governed by the same set of rules. The only difference is the assets that we allow you to hold within them. Now, we are not licensed securities brokers, so you don't have to worry about us selling you investments or pitching you investments. We're actually restricted from doing so. Our account agreement with our clients, our IRA clients, simply states you can invest in anything the IRS allows, but you have to pick the investment. And that's where the self in self-directed comes from. It's just a marketing term. Doesn't really mean anything. It just indicates that you as the IRA owner choose your own investment. And we're going to talk about the different types of investments that we see our Nuview clients make that are most common, but you'll see that the IRS does not restrict us as to what we're allowed to hold in our IRA. It just means we have to find a company that's willing to administrate the IRA for whatever investments that we choose. So we don't give any tax, legal, or investment advice. We strictly act as the custodian for your IRA to hold alternative investments instead of traditional investments. I wanted to start with this quote, and this actually isn't a quote. This is actually from a Forbes article back in March of 2020. I think I call this the zinger. This would be the zinger as to why these self-directed IRAs are so important or so impactful for those of you who might be entrepreneurial by nature, you want to find your own investments, or you're just an investor that has an education in some other field like real estate investing, oil and gas investing, medical device development, things that might not suit in the stock market, but you can apply your knowledge as, say, a real estate investor to your IRA investments. And they did a study, Forbes was a part of the study, and they were looking at all the things that the IRS was finding when it comes to IRAs. And this is very interesting. What they found is that out of all of the IRAs currently held in America, all of the IRAs valued above $5 million, 25% of the assets held within those IRAs are alternative assets. Alternative assets are the assets that we would hold here at Nuview Trust Company. Alternative assets are typically not what Fidelity holds, but that's a staggering number. Out of the $5 million IRAs, 25% of the assets are alternative assets. Here's the catch to that. Only 2% of IRAs hold non-traditional or alternative assets. So what's that mean? 98% of Americans that have an IRA are only holding traditional assets, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, CDs. By no means am I saying those are the wrong investments to hold, but what I am saying is that most people don't realize that you can invest in alternative assets as well. And if you look at the people that have $5 million IRAs, they already understand this. So whether they're holding fee simple real estate, land, investments into startup companies, oil and gas investments, the list goes on and on. You can see the ones that have the high dollar amounts are already keen to the fact that alternative assets can really grow your IRA in an exponential fashion. And again, alternative assets, and we'll define what those are. Typically, you have to work with a self-directed custodian like Nuview to hold those alternative assets. So in reality, Nuview clients do not just have an IRA with Nuview. They have an IRA with Nuview and Fidelity, or Nuview and Charles Schwab, Nuview and TD Ameritrade. Why? Because that gives them true diversification to hold public assets in their Fidelity account and non-traditional or alternative assets in their Nuview account. So back to what is a self-directed IRA? It is an IRA. Don't get confused that it's a special IRA that fits a certain set of rules. IRAs are IRAs or IRAs. There's no difference legally in an IRA at Fidelity and an IRA at Nuview Trust Company. The only difference, again, is what the companies do as a business model. Fidelity sells investments. They hold public investments. Nuview doesn't sell investments. We hold alternative investments. What should you invest in? Again, I'm not here to give you investment advice, but what I would say is that you are going to make better returns for yourself investing in what you are knowledgeable about or what you understand. And that's really what it comes down to it. So if you are knowledgeable or you understand some investment outside of the stock market, just realize that investment can most likely fit inside of an IRA. So when you apply your knowledge as an investor to your retirement account, that's how you make better returns in the long run. Will you stub your toe? Obviously, you will stub your toe investing in stocks or real estate or any other investment. But when you invest in what you're knowledgeable about, you stub your toe less. So that's what you kind of want to think of when you invest before you set up an IRA and invest in anything. But here's some of the investments that we see at Nuview. So alternative investments, here's the most common. Okay, most common is we see clients take their self-directed IRA and purchase real estate. It could be fee simple real estate, commercial real estate, multifamily real estate, land, condominiums. The list goes on and on. Okay. The only difference is your IRA holds title to these properties. You don't hold title to the property. It's a little bit different way of thinking, but think about it when you own a stock at Fidelity in your IRA. By definition, you don't own the stock. Your IRA owns the stock. When do you get your benefit? You get your benefit from the distributions you take from your IRA. So it's no different than using your IRA to buy real estate. Your IRA is vested as the legal owner. You get your benefit from distributions from the IRA out of the profit or however you choose to do so. And we'll dive a little bit deeper into this in the following slides, but real estate's a common investment that we see. Promissory notes, often secured by real estate, is probably the biggest asset class we see. That's actually what I do with my own IRA. Coming from a lending background, I'm very familiar with how loans work. I know how to structure a promissory note. I understand how banks make money. If you want to turn your IRA into a bank and use your IRA to loan to real estate investors, that's a very, very common investment. We actually, next week, we're going to dive deeper into how notes, promissory notes work inside of an IRA. And the following week after that, we're actually going to have an individual that's going to talk about how to do due diligence on those investments. So this is just kind of the starting point to some more education, but secured promissory notes is a big investment class that we hold here at Nuview. Also, you could do unsecured notes, convertible notes. Really any type of note can be held inside of an IRA. It's just that your lender is listed, or your IRA is listed as the lender. Other investments we see very commonly, private stock and private entity investments. Private entity investments, often we see IRAs invest into LLCs. These LLCs can be doing a multitude of things. An LLC could be running an ice cream shop. An LLC can be selling shoes, or most commonly we see an LLC owns real estate. This is important too, even if you don't have an IRA, if you are raising capital. This is a huge opportunity for you to tap in to the $30 trillion that's sitting in retirement accounts today. A lot of clients like to take their IRAs and invest passively into entities like LLCs that might own and operate an apartment building or commercial property. So it goes two ways. There's always two sides to IRAs, right? What am I doing with my own IRA? What is it invested in? And if I'm in a field that could use private capital, am I utilizing other people's IRAs to fund my personal investments? We'll dive into that a little bit more, but the top three investments we see at Nuview would be real estate, promissory notes, and investments into private entities. But the list goes on. By rule, the IRS does not tell us what we are allowed to invest in. They don't have this super long list that says yes, 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 yes. They have a super short list that just has two investments that says we don't want those in an IRA. And that would just be life insurance contracts and collectibles. That's it. Anything else is fair game. So as a general rule of thumb, if it's an asset you can hold title to, if it's an asset you can draw up a purchase agreement for, the purchaser can be your IRA, the owner can be your IRA. What would be the benefits of holding some of these investments like real estate, promissory notes, or even investments into private companies? Well, one of the things is just the tax savings. Now, this is just for IRAs altogether, not self-directed IRAs, but IRAs altogether have better tax benefits than we do as an individual. So for instance, if I, Nate Hare, go out and take my own money out of my bank account and I buy and sell real estate, well, I have to pay capital gains tax. Greg mentioned how capital gains tax most likely will be going up in the future. We'll see, right? I don't have a crystal ball, but at a bare minimum, I'm going to have to pay long-term or short-term capital gains on the money that I earn if I invest as an individual. Okay, same thing with any other investment. If I'm investing in cryptocurrency, I see a lot of people, all jumping on the bandwagon of cryptocurrency. Nobody's really talking about the taxation that's going to create too with cryptocurrency, because that is personal income. That's income to you as an individual if you're using your money. So you have to report that income and you have to pay taxes on that income. With IRAs, it doesn't work like that, because an IRA, all IRAs are tax exempt trusts. Now, some are taxed differently than others, but they all have a tax benefit that we don't get as individuals. One is if you have a traditional IRA, the investments grow tax deferred, meaning I can buy and sell a property. I don't pay any taxes, no capital gains tax. So what that enables me to do is take all of the capital that I made from that sale and reinvest it into another property. That enables me to exponentially speed the growth of my account because I don't have to pay taxes annually. Uncle Sam isn't there every year trying to take a piece of my profit. I can defer all the taxes to the end. Now, usually if it's a tax deferred account like a traditional IRA, when do I pay the taxes? When I take distributions. But again, that could be 30 years down the road after I've bought and sold 100 investments. Other IRAs grow completely tax-free, where I can invest the money and pay no taxes ever in my life. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we dive into the types of accounts. We've got 7 types here, and I'll talk about the way that those are taxed differently. And you can kind of decide which ones are best for you. There's ones that I really like, and we'll get to that in a second. But tax savings is something that you get with IRAs and 401ks and other retirement plans that you don't get as an individual. So if you're not using an IRA to some degree, and you're just using your money to be an investor and you're trying to get to retirement, just realize you have a silent partner named Uncle Sam that's going to be with you every single year asking for his 30, 35, 37%. Okay, so utilizing an IRA will help you save for retirement faster than just doing it on your own. Okay, diversification. kind of touched on this. Most of our clients at Nuview have IRAs at Fidelity or Charles Schwab, and they have IRAs at Nuview. Why? Because it allows them to invest in all asset classes, public assets and private assets. Any wealth advisor will tell you you should be properly diversified, but be careful of the wealth advisors that are just saying, yes, we have you diversified in these high risk mutual funds, these medium risk mutual funds, and these low risk mutual funds. I would say you just have a bunch of mutual funds. Okay, that's probably not the diversification you want. When you look at the other asset classes like real estate and other things, that's real true diversification. And again, everybody's different, but just think about that in your investment portfolio, is having some other assets or alternative assets. Because remember that slide I showed you in the beginning, 25% of the assets in the $5 million IRAs are alternative assets. The other thing is the assets that we hold here are tangible. You don't often get that in your stocks at Fidelity. If you invest in a stock, again, not calling stocks bad, but if you buy the wrong stock and that company goes out of business, you're subject to losing everything that you invested. But when you invest in things like real estate's like this table. Okay, real estate, you can drive by, you can touch it, you can feel it. Does it go up and down in value depending on where the market is? Yes, but it doesn't disappear. You can buy real estate and own real estate in an IRA, and it may have its ups and downs in value, but it will never disappear. The other thing is there's a alternative benefit to some of these assets where you get cash flow. If you own a rental property in your IRA, whether the investment's going up and down in value, you still get rents. If you pick the right area and you have it rented, there's a renter that's paying rents that are going right into your IRA, tax deferred or tax free. So not only is it tangible, but there's alternate income streams that can be provided to your IRA. There's other creative strategies too that clients will use when they buy real estate in an IRA. Just touching on some different things to think about, some food for thought. Some clients will actually use their IRA to buy a piece of property and then sell or finance it to somebody that can't get conventional financing at a bank. What's that provide to the IRA? Well, you can buy the property, you can get a down payment that's paid into the IRA. Then your IRA's investment of real estate turns into a note where you get monthly interest payment until the note's paid off. Great strategy if you do it right. But really what you want to invest in is just invest in what you know best, invest in what you understand. A self-directed IRA is not for everybody, but it is for the guy or gal who want to invest in something that's outside of the stock market, that they understand, that they can self-manage and understand so they can sleep at night. That's typically how you're going to make the best returns in any retirement account if you do it like that. The other thing I want to mention too is that, and this is again a little bit cheesy, but I think it's really important to understand, what is your retirement assets doing besides providing you a return? Ask yourself that question. If you have a mutual fund and you have no idea what's in it, I would say find out what's in it. Find out the companies that you are invested in, right? Are they tech companies? Are they medical companies? What are the companies doing? Are they providing a social benefit, to the rest of the world? That's very important to a lot of people these days. Here's the cool thing I like about self-directed IRAs, and I'll use myself as an example. I've done loans to real estate investor out of my Roth IRA and my health savings account. I make above average return, double-digit returns by negotiating terms with the borrower who's going to pay interest payments back to my accounts, but it doesn't stop there. Because when I invest with a good local real estate investor who's taking my money out of my retirement account, what are they doing? They're buying a house that typically is a foreclosure, pre-foreclosure, house that's abandoned. Those are the ones real estate investors are buying. They're not buying the pretty houses, they're buying the ugly houses and making them pretty. In order to make them pretty though, what do they have to do? They've got to hire contractors, who have subcontractors. They're all buying equipment and lumber and paint from local businesses. So with my money, even though I'm making double-digit returns, I'm putting a local real estate investor to work who's hiring contractors and subcontractors in my neighborhood who are putting money right back into our local businesses. And when they are finished with the house and put the white picket fence up and then move the family in, they raise the values of the other homes in the neighborhood. And then what happens? They pay me back when they sell it or refinance, and then we do it again. That's what I talk about when I'm talking about social investing, is what else is your money doing besides making you a return? And I feel very good when I have an investment like that, because I know a lot of other people are benefiting from my retirement account investment besides just me getting a return into it. Just something to think about. But I would say that that's an important thing, especially in today's world. So moving on. Okay, let's talk about the types of accounts that can be self-directed. Now, if you have been asleep, hopefully you have not been asleep. Grace is right here. She's going to hunt you down. She's our moderator right here. I will find your address. And no, I'm just kidding. So, but if you are awake now, I want you to at least take pictures or mental images of these slides, because these are the 7 types of accounts that can be self-directed. It's not just one. A lot of people just have one account, but I would very, very highly suggest you look at some of the other plans that are available to you, because the more self-directed plans that you can set up for yourself, the less you're going to pay in taxes over your lifetime. The ones that people are most familiar with are these 2 guys right here, the traditional IRA and the Roth IRA. What's the difference between the 2? Just how they're taxed. Okay. Anybody can have a traditional IRA or a Roth IRA nowadays, provided you have some earned income so that you can make contributions. But a lot of people have these accounts not because they just started a traditional and a Roth at the very beginning, but usually if you worked at a job, had a 401k or a 403b or a 457 plan, you left that company that set that plan up for you. Typically, those plans will roll into either a traditional IRA or a Roth IRA. If your bucket of money is pre-tax, meaning you have not paid taxes on that bucket of money yet, that rolls into a traditional IRA. Traditional IRAs are what 70% of Americans have when it comes to your IRAs. This is the most common IRA. Okay. How does it work? When you put money in, you typically get a tax deduction for how much you contribute. You can contribute up to $6,000 per year. And when you take the money out, you pay taxes on what you take out. But the growth on the investments is completely deferred. So you can buy and sell property in your traditional IRA. You never have to pay capital gains tax or tax on the earnings. You only have to pay taxes when you take it out as a distribution to yourself. And preferably that's probably after age 59 and a half, where you don't have to pay a 10% penalty and you're potentially in a lower tax bracket. Now, do you know what tax bracket you want to retire in? A lot of people do not know, but that's basically how the traditional IRA works. You put money in, you get a deduction. All the growth is deferred. You pay taxes at the very end. The Roth IRA works almost the polar opposite. Now, the Roth IRA can be extremely powerful, especially when you apply some of these real estate strategies and note strategies that I see out there that we're going to be talking a little bit, diving deeper in some of these new presentations that we're going to be doing on a weekly basis. But the Roth IRA works like this. When you make a contribution to a Roth, you don't get a tax deduction. So it's after tax. It's like the money in your back pocket. You already paid Uncle Sam because that's what you're left with in your back pocket. So when you make a contribution into your Roth IRA, you don't get a tax deduction. Now, since the taxes have been paid, your investments grow tax deferred, just like the traditional. So I can buy and sell real estate. I can flip notes. I can do all sorts of things, buy and sell cryptocurrency. I don't have to pay any taxes on the earnings as I sell things. But here is the benefit with the Roth IRA that's so sweet. If I have a Roth IRA open for 5 tax years and I'm above the age of 59 and a half, once I meet those 2 criteria, all of my distributions out of my Roth are tax-free and penalty-free. Those are called qualified distributions, tax-free and penalty-free for the rest of my life. I am off the grid. I don't have to report any of this. I don't have to tell Uncle Sam, I don't owe you anything. That is powerful, especially for you crypto guys out there that are buying Dogecoin and making 6 million% in a day. Yeah, I've seen it. Okay. How much taxes are you paying on that money? Okay. What type of IRA would you want that in? One that you pay taxes on the total bucket like a traditional, or one that you get the taxes out of the way on the front end and pay no taxes down the road like you do in a Roth IRA? Here's a common question that I get. Well, Nate, my CPA told me I make too much money to have a Roth IRA. My first response would be, get a new CPA that understands the rules, because anybody can have a Roth IRA. It doesn't matter what your income is now. Now, there are still income limits for making contributions to a Roth IRA. It is important to know that. Okay, roughly, if you make a healthy 6-figure income, you cannot make a contribution to a Roth. But here's the catch. Anybody can make a contribution to a traditional. There is no income limit for that. And there's no income limit currently, ever since 2010, to do what's called a Roth conversion, which is converting my traditional IRA money to my Roth IRA. So if you make above the income limit to make a direct contribution to a Roth, you just do the Florida two-step. The Florida two-step means I make a contribution to my traditional because anybody can do that. Doesn't matter what income I make. And then I can convert that to my Roth IRA because there's no income limit to do that either. So again, is it illegal to do that? No, it's perfectly within the rules. These are the rules that the IRS has set up for us. We're just teaching you how to stick it to the government with their own rules, but most of the people don't even get this education because they don't teach this stuff in school. They should, but they don't. So if you have questions about how that works, again, reach out to us, info@nuviewtrustcompany.com. But I'm going to move on and get to some of these other plans. Employer plans can also be self-directed. Okay, employer plans would include your SEP IRA, your simple IRA, or your individual 401k. These are all plans that we have here at Nuview. Now, what are the benefits? I'm not going to go too deep, and we'll have a special webinar just for these plans because I can spend a whole day talking about these plans. But the benefit that these plans give that's different than the personal plans is you can make larger contributions to these plans. You do have to be self-employed, however. So you have to have some Schedule C income, or you have to be a business owner paying yourself a salary. You have to have some self-employment income in order to make contributions to these, but the contributions are much, much larger than your personal plans. For instance, the SEP IRA, if you're still making 2020 contributions, you can contribute up to $57,000. It is based on how much you report in income though. And then for 2021, they increased that to $58,000. So again, you can see much, much larger than the $6,000 you can contribute to a traditional or Roth. Okay, the simple is a little bit higher as well, not quite as high as the SEP. And the 401k even lets you contribute more than that $58,000. Here's one of the things that a lot of our clients like to do at Nuview though. If they really like the opportunity to grow their investments completely tax-free and not tax deferred, they just use these plans to make larger contributions. I'll give you an example. Let's say you're a real estate investor, or you're a realtor, or a CPA or attorney, and you can have the opportunity to have a SEP IRA and make large contributions. Most CPAs will say, yes, put money in a SEP IRA so you could take that large tax deduction, just like a traditional IRA. I would ask you the question, do you want the tax deduction? Is that more powerful to you? Or would you rather put it in after tax and let it grow tax-free? That really just depends on your investment strategy. Sometimes tax deduction is more powerful if you are getting more benefit from the deduction and your account's growing very slowly. But if you have an investment that's going to grow very quickly, or you're buying crypto, or you're doing something like seller financing, or kind of what Greg mentioned, having your IRA borrow money to buy larger investments, I would say you might want to look at the Roth IRA for those. And here's what the rules allow you to do. Just like I can put contributions into a traditional and convert it to a Roth, I can do the same thing with my SEP IRA. I can make a $58,000 contribution to my SEP and then convert it to my Roth. I know what a lot of you are thinking. Does that mean I'm double taxed? No, you're not double taxed. Again, consult with your CPA because everybody's a little bit different. But if you make a contribution in theory to a SEP and you don't take the tax deduction, you basically didn't take the tax deduction, so it's after tax. When you convert that to your Roth, it just goes over as is. You don't have to pay taxes because you never took the deduction. But if you make the contribution and you do take the tax deduction, then when you convert it, you got to pay the tax back. So you're back to an after-tax contribution either way you do it. But again, consult with the CPA. But when you're looking at these plans, again, I know some of you are thinking, well, shoot, I only have a traditional. I only have a Roth. I'm self-employed. I should have these plans so I can stash more money away from Uncle Sam. Plus, when you have more buckets to put money in, it gives you more buying power to buy investments you wouldn't have otherwise. Okay, so you always want to be thinking about what plans are that I can set up for myself or my family, okay, that can get me to retirement much, much quicker than the way I'm doing it now. And here's the last two plans that I want to talk about. Some of my favorite plans. These work a little different because these aren't really retirement plans. These are plans that you can put money away. You can get, I'm losing my place here. Health savings accounts and Coverdell education accounts, you can put money in. They grow tax deferred, but here's the cool thing. The distributions that you take out of these plans, out of the investment profit, can go to pay specific expenses when it comes to health expenses and education expenses today, not retirement. So we'll just go over these real quickly. The health savings account. A lot of people have health savings accounts because their business or their job set one up for them. You would be shocked how many people I ask, what do you invested in your health savings account? They say, well, nothing, it's just cash. Okay. Realize you can invest your health savings account. You can grow your health savings account, and you can use the investment profit to pay for out-of-pocket health expenses to cover things like your doctor's visits, acupuncture, prescriptions, holistic medicine. You can even buy a pool. I've seen clients buy a pool with their health savings account with a tax-free, penalty-free distribution to buy a pool. Why? Because their doctor said a pool was good for their bad back. There is a lot of creative things you can do with this health savings account. And here's the other cool thing that the health savings account gives you that no other account gives you is not only does it grow tax deferred, not only do the distributions come out tax-free for qualified health expenses, but when you put money into it, you also get a tax deduction. It's like a traditional going in and a Roth coming out, and you don't have to wait until 59 and a half to use it. So you can see the contribution limits there on the right. Basically, it's based on who is on your insurance plan. You do have to have a high deductible health insurance. Call your health insurance provider, ask them if you're HSA compatible. But if it's just you covered on the plan, you can put up to $3,550, fully tax deductible. And if it's a family plan, you and another person, it's $7,100. The Coverdell education plan works similarly. Now, you don't get a tax deduction when you make contributions. However, when you invest it, the profit grows completely tax deferred. And when you take distributions out of the Coverdell, you can use it to pay for qualified education expenses for your kids or grandkids, all the way from pre-K through college. So this is not just a college savings plan. This is a today plan if your kids are just getting into school or if they're in elementary school. Now, a lot of people say, well, what's the difference between a Coverdell and a 529 plan? 529 plans are government sponsored. You can put large contributions in there, typically larger than what you can put in the Coverdell, but you don't get to pick the investments. Are they good plans? Yeah, they're great plans. But typically people put money in there so that it can grow. They don't pick the investments, but it gives them a way to stash money away for college expenses and tuition. The Coverdell education account, very little is known about this account. Why? Because it can only be self-directed. Right? So it's the only education plan that can be self-directed. You're limited to putting $2,000 in per child per year. But again, if you have 3 children, 4 children, you set up a Coverdell education account for each of them. And again, putting $2,000 in each child's account gives you more buying power. And you want to get out of the mentality that, well, what do I do with $2,000? You can partner all of these accounts together on the same investment. And that's where the concept of self-direction really becomes most impactful, is that, say it's you and a spouse, you each have traditional IRAs or Roth IRAs. You might have your own business. So you've got a SEP IRA or a couple SEP IRAs set up for you and the spouse. You've got a high deductible health plan, which also gives you the ability to have a health savings account, which you also put money in and get tax deductions for. And then you've got 3 or 4 kiddos that you set up Coverdell Education's account. Well, now you've got 7, 8, 9 accounts that can all partner together on, say, one rental property. The easy thing is, once you own that investment, and we process it here at Nuview, when you get rent checks, the renter just pays one rent check to Nuview, and we just splice that check up based on the ownership percentages of each of those accounts, but you get multiple accounts working at the same exact time. Some of the profit can be taken out to pay for health expenses today. Some of it can be taken out to pay for education expenses for the kids. And then you've got the other accounts, your own personal accounts, that can be saved and grow for retirement. Okay. But now with the whole crypto age, and again, I don't want to spend too much time on crypto. Now you can make $2,000 investments and actually make them powerful. So think about if you bought crypto with a $2,000 education account for your son or your daughter, and then that became a $20,000 account. Guess what you just did? You took $2,000 and now you've got $20,000 to pay tax-free for qualified education expenses. In comparison to if you're just investing in crypto outside of your account, guess what? Uncle Sam's going to want 35, 37% of that before you pay the education expenses. So in theory, you can do the same investments, just using a different bucket to do the investments, and you could consume more goods with the same amount of profit because Uncle Sam is not in the equation. So those 7 plans are really the meat and potatoes to what we do here at Nuview. Okay. All these plans can be self-directed. They can be self-directed together. And I do have a little special promo at the end if you're interested, both for new clients and current clients, if you want to open more self-directed accounts. I have a case study on how it looks like to buy real estate in an IRA, and then we'll talk about the actual investment options. But first, I want to touch on the restrictions to self-directed IRAs and just IRAs in general. Okay, so these are not just self-directed rules. These are IRA rules. You don't normally have to have this conversation with your guy at Fidelity because you're not buying and selling investments from people. You're buying and selling investments from Wall Street. You're buying stock certificates, you're buying mutual funds, you're buying government-backed bonds, CDs, and those types of things. You're not dealing with the things that the IRS really wants you to stay away from. But when you get into the self-directed IRA world, well, then you do have to talk about these because there are certain restrictions that prevent your IRA mainly from investing with certain individuals. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about that. So first, there's different categories of restrictions. The first one I kind of mentioned at the beginning. There's just investment restrictions. The two things you are not allowed to buy in an IRA, collectibles and life insurance. Okay? Collectibles are specifically defined, works of arts, paintings, classic cars. One of the strangest ones on the list is alcoholic beverage collections. So I would always say, if you're looking to buy booze with your IRA, there's probably a different class you should be taking before this class, but there's just no collectibles. Why? Collectibles are hard to value, so they don't like things that are hard to value inside of an IRA, which may or may not be taxed at some point. So collectibles is off the list. And then life insurance contracts, they just don't like to see an IRA have a vested interest to see other people die, because people might be dying a lot sooner than they anticipated if we got paid on that. That's just a joke, but those are the only two restrictions when it comes to investment restrictions. As I mentioned, the IRS doesn't tell us what we're allowed to invest in, just what we're not allowed to invest in, and it's just those two things. The biggest thing that we talk about with self-directed IRAs is the people that are restricted from benefiting from the investment an IRA makes or transacting with the IRA directly or indirectly. Okay? And these are specifically defined. It's pretty black and white for the most part when it comes to the disqualified people from your IRA. The people who are disqualified, who cannot benefit from the IRA's transaction or the IRA or any other plan. Here's the list. I'll give you guys 2 seconds to memorize the list, and then I'll move on. And I will tell you, I'm joking. You don't have to memorize this list. I'm going to break it down for you real simply and break it down in a way that you can understand. Okay. Now, this is the actual list. But when it comes to an IRA doing a transaction or an IRA providing a benefit, the IRA's investment must only benefit the IRA. Remember, your benefit as the IRA owner is from the distributions you take from the IRA. That's how you benefit from your IRA. But before that point, the investment the IRA makes must only benefit the IRA. For example, if you use your IRA to buy a house, it has to be for investment purposes. You can't buy your own house that you live in, because it's no longer an investment at that point. You're just buying the house that you live in, so you're getting a benefit. Can you take a distribution to go buy a house? Yes, you can do that if you want, but you can't direct your IRA to buy something that you own personally. Really, in a sense, what you're doing is you're self-dealing with your IRA. And when there's self-dealing is allowed, you can probably see that that probably opens up a lot of potential fraud with that, when you're allowed to dictate what's bought and sold from your IRA and you're the one buying and selling to and from your IRA. So there's no self-dealing or self-benefiting. Okay, you, the IRA owner, you're the main disqualified person. So that's pretty clear, right? If I own a house, I can't sell it to my IRA. Okay, I can't buy an asset from my IRA because, again, I represent both sides. It's a conflict of interest. But there's also other family members that are also disqualified. That would be your spouse, your kids, grandkids, and their spouses, and then your parents, grandparents, and on upwards. We call those lineal ascendants. And then downwards with the kids and grandkids, those would be your lineal descendants. So the disqualified people, if I'm going to summarize this list, the disqualified people to my IRA would be me, my spouse, my parents, grandparents, all the way up, kids, grandkids, and their spouses, and any companies those people own, control, manage, or are highly compensated by. Okay, I'll repeat that. Disqualified people, me, spouse, up the line, down the line, and any companies those people own, control, manage, or are highly compensated by. What about brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, cousins, nieces, nephews? By definition, those are not disqualified to your IRA. So could you invest with your IRA buying a house from your brother? You could, not sure that that's the investment you want to do, but you can do that based on the rules. Now, why do they allow brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, but not these family members? When you think about it, when you die, who usually gets your money, your wife or your brother? Probably should be your wife, because if you give it directly to your brother, she's probably going to dig you out of the grave and bury you again. But that's typically how wealth is passed. It's passed to the kids or the spouse. So if those are the people that are end up inheriting the IRA, they don't want those people engaged as a beneficiary to those investments. Okay, so you just have to stay away from those family members, and you are perfectly safe. Okay, disqualified people, they can't buy, sell, trade, loan, or extend services to the IRA or its investments. One thing I will touch on, buy, sell, trade, loan, that's pretty self-explanatory. Extension of services is one that's gray, I will say, and we can expand on this in other presentations. I don't want to spend too much time on it today, but there's no definition to the extension of a service. So we do know from case law what the IRS is talking about is they don't want the IRA extending something that would be perceived as what should be done as, say, a contribution. I'll give you an example. If I use my IRA to buy a rental property, okay, there needs to be some work done on that property. I've got to get contractors out there. They've got to put up some siding, maybe a new roof. They don't want me, the IRA owner or a disqualified person, doing that labor. Why? It's an extension of a service. And really what I'm doing is I'm raising the value of the property without making a contribution to my IRA. So unfortunately, you have to hire that work out. It has to be done. The services to the asset has to be done by a non-disqualified person. Now, some people say, well, what about picking renters? Or, if I'm a real estate agent, can I represent my IRA? You can. You still are the fiduciary to your IRA. And as a fiduciary, you have to do certain things. The IRA is not going to do things on its own. So when it comes to choosing the investments for your IRA, that's you, the fiduciary. You make those decisions. If your IRA owns a property, can I pick the renters? Sure, you can pick the renters. As long as you're not compensated for that activity, you can pick the renters. That's not really an extension of a service. But when it comes to swinging a hammer, then you're probably playing with fire. So we always say, are you using your brain or are you using your brawn? If you're using your brain, you're just being a good fiduciary in most cases. If you're using your brawn, then you might be getting yourself into trouble. And when it comes to real estate agents, you can represent your IRA in a sale or a purchase of a property, but unfortunately you cannot profit from that investment. You can't take a personal benefit by taking a commission. There's different ways that you can, I don't want to say go around this, but what I have seen real estate agents do who are representing their IRA in the transaction that know they can't take a commission, they just reduce the sales price, right? Or work it into the sales price where the commission is taken off the sales price, because now the benefits to the IRA, so you don't lose out on that money. It's just not paid to you in cash. It's paid to the IRA in a discount. Okay, just things to think about and just food for thought. But those would be your prohibited transactions and things you cannot do with your IRA. What are the cool things you can do with your IRA? Well, kind of what I mentioned, all the things that you can invest in. Okay, so here's some of the things we own here at Nuview in our clients' accounts, all types of real estate. Fee simple real estate, condos, foreclosures. We have people that will go to the foreclosures and buy foreclosed property. You can do that with your IRA money. There's different ways you can do that. I would say talk to myself or Brian Martinez, my sales associate. We could talk to you about the different strategies you can do for foreclosures, because foreclosure is a little different. Sometimes you have to have cash on the spot. So it's a little bit different way we would process that up front. But most of these other investments can be processed within, say, 24 to 48 hours once we've got the right documentation. So that could be your IRA purchasing real estate options, your IRA purchasing commercial property, land, tax liens, the list goes on and on. Promissory notes, or that's private entities, sorry. Private entities could be private entities, LLCs, partnerships, joint ventures, or trusts. Again, those can all be purchased within an IRA. And then promissory notes is the one that I really like, that we see a lot of investors do, is they just use their IRA like a bank. They're either creating notes as your IRA being a lender to a borrower who might be buying an investment property or a flip, Or you can buy existing notes. There's a lot of banks or lenders that actually sell off notes to get them off their books. And those notes can be performing notes or non-performing notes. Again, it's up to you to decide what type of note or what type of entity or what type of real estate you want to buy. We just act as the custodian to make sure everything's vested correctly in the name of your IRA and it's properly administrated so you get your tax benefits. But you still do the legwork. That's where the self-directed IRA comes from. You do the legwork to find it. We help you fund it, and then we hold it. Okay. So what would be the steps? And right after this, I'm going to go through an actual case study of a Nuview client, but the steps are really easy. Quick 5 steps. The first step in opening or to owning these alternative assets in an IRA would be open a self-directed IRA with Nuview. Are there other companies that do what we do? Yes, but they all suck. So just use Nuview. That's all I got to say about that. We've been around in the business for 17 years. I kind of make that joke, but there's a lot of companies that have just popped up in the last few years. Be careful with those companies. We've been established. We've been doing this. We're not a new kid on the block. We've got close to $2 billion in assets under management. So we understand how to do this. There's not an investment on this planet when it comes to alternative that we haven't seen and or processed hundreds of times. So first step is if you want to buy real estate or notes or any of those other investments is open an account with Nuview. The second step is funding that account. You can fund it one of 3 ways. You can make a contribution, just like you make a contribution to any other IRA. Okay? You can make a contribution for 2020 and 2021 at this point. So a lot of people are making double contributions to try to beat that tax deadline on May 15th. Once you've got the account open and funded, again, the other ways you can fund it are a transfer. That would be the most common way we see IRAs or self-directed IRAs funded is if you've got a little bit of money at Fidelity or Charles Schwab, you just transfer some of that money over to Nuview. Now, how much do you transfer? It's up to you how much you transfer. Obviously, you have to have enough capital so that we can make the investment. But when it comes to real estate, sometimes you don't know. So what I like to say is if you know you're going to buy real estate, at least get the account set up and move in or make a contribution enough to just cover the earnest money deposit, at least earnest money or option fee. That way you've got the account set up. It's got a little bit of money in there. That way, if you run across an investment on the weekend and you want to put it in your IRA, you can at least get with us, get with our operations team, and they can help walk you through at least the first steps of getting the contract in the name of your IRA, getting the earnest money sent to the title company or attorney's office. And then by that time, if you've got a typical 30-day close, you can transfer the rest of the money over from Fidelity or Charles Schwab. The reason I say that is because you don't want to move a bunch of money to Nuview and just have it sit here and not gain any interest. So we totally understand that. And that's why we don't have account minimums, but at least put a little bit of money in there so we can at least start the first end of the transaction so you don't lose out on any investments. And then the other way you can fund it is through rollover. Rollovers are typically done when you leave a company and you had a 401k or you have a 403b. You can roll that money into your account. That's a little bit different process. Sometimes takes a little bit longer than a transfer, but all 3 of those ways are ways that you can fund your IRA or IRAs here at Nuview. Once you've got the account open and funded, you locate the investment. Okay. We don't have investments to sell you. So just remember that. You have to go out there and find investments. Now, what Nuview likes to do is we like to create networking events that give you the opportunity to network with other local investors. We do have some events coming up that are live that will give you that opportunity if you're in the area, but we also stream all this online. So you're more than happy to share your information in the live stream if people want to take it down, and that's perfectly allowable. But locating your investment is something that you will have to do. So a lot of people will find their investments at their local RIAs, right? We serve clients all over the country. There's local RIAs in every city in America. Okay? People will find their off-market real estate deals often by attending local RIAs, but they need somewhere to put it, and they'll still have a Nuview account so that we can put those assets within the tax-deferred or tax-free IRA. Once you find the investment, we've got an operations team that is phenomenal. They will help walk you through the very, very easy process of filling out our purchase forms and collecting whatever documents they need to fund the investment. And once we've got all documents filled out and completed, we can fund the investment in 24 to 48 hours. So that would be step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Open the account, fund it, find your investment, and let Nuview take over the rest. Here's an actual case study from an actual client, okay, just to kind of give you some perspective on how these investments would work and where the benefit lies. So we had a Nuview client that actually invested in a property that they found through a local RIA. Okay. The purchase price, they were buying this below market value. Okay. They were buying this for $215,000. It was worth a little bit more according to the ARV. They found it no different than how they would find an investment for themselves personally. The only thing they do different on the front end is when they draw up the purchase contract, the purchaser is not them, the individual, the purchaser is their IRA. So there's a special vesting that we use here at Nuview. If it's your Nuview account, the buyer would read Nuview Trust Company. FBO stands for the benefit of, and would follow with your name and account number. If you were using multiple accounts, you would just have multiple names: Nuview Trust Company FBO, Nate Hare's traditional IRA, and Nuview Trust Company FBO, Nate Hare's HSA, right? So you could put as many accounts as you want on there, and then we actually sign as the buyer. And in this specific case, the client used 3 different accounts, okay? He used his traditional IRA that he had from an old rollover from a 401k that he had. His wife had a Roth IRA that she had set up that she had been making contributions to for years. And they also had an HSA through the husband's job that he had about $45,000 in. Okay. Again, the reason he used all 3 of these accounts is gave him more buying power. He wouldn't have been able to buy it with just his traditional IRA. He wouldn't have been able to buy it individually with any of the other IRAs, but combining all 3, now you can buy the investment for $215,000. And they had a little bit of reserves too. This wasn't all. That's very important, because when you're buying real estate, you got to realize if there's any expenses that come up, you want to have some cash in the IRAs to account to pay contractors, vacancy, if it's rented out, or you have to make some repairs. You don't want to exhaust all your funds and be stuck without any money in the IRA to account for those things. So our operations team helped fund this account. It was owned based on the ownership percentages of $100,000 from the husband's traditional, which was just less than 50%. The wife's Roth IRA put in 70, the HSA 45. And then they rented the property out pretty quickly. They bought it in a good area. There's about 1 month, I think, while they did a little paint and touch up when it wasn't rented. But as soon as they got it rented, they rented for $1,875. Okay, good area. And they rented that for 12 months, put the renter on a 12-month lease. And the renter made payments to Nuview Trust Company, FBO, client's name and account number, and they sent it to our Nuview office here in Longwood, Florida. What we do with that check is we take that check. It applies back to the asset that we have. We see that it's a split ownership or it's owned jointly between different accounts. And we just divvy up the percentages of ownership and we split that check up multiple ways. It doesn't take any extra work on your part. Doesn't really take much extra work on our part. But again, it does allow you to put money into different buckets that fit different purposes. Okay. So if you just divide that 1875 and look at that as a return, that's 10.4%. Now remember, that's just on the rents. That doesn't account for any appreciation too. So in a perfect world, if you've got the asset rented, if you've got the house rented and the property's going up in value, you're not only getting the upside of the appreciation, you're getting cash flow at the same time. And remember, the asset is tangible. So it's very, very different from a stock. A stock, you just have to hope for appreciation. It's not tangible and you don't have monthly cash flow that you get from a renter. So is this a good investment? I would say this is a great investment. Think about how many people can retire earlier if they made 10% or 15% on an annual basis secured by real estate. Okay? And where's the real estate market going? Nowhere. Things like real estate and healthcare, all these industries, these are industries that are not going anywhere. Do they have different cycles on how you invest and how you capitalize? Sure they do. But real estate as an investment option is not something that's going to disappear. So just you want to think about if I'm a real estate investor or a real estate's doing really well, or if I just want an investment that's down the block. I don't want to invest in a mutual fund and hope that it goes up and not know what these investments are doing. I'd rather buy this house that's right here in my neighborhood that I can keep an eye on. I can pick the renters, and it's a socially conscious investment for me because when I hold this investment, treat it nice, maybe add some repairs to it, it goes up in value. Well, I'm doing something good for my neighbors too. Okay. But you also want to think, what IRAs could I use on this? And if you're making those double-digit returns, you might want to ask yourself, in this case, the husband might want to ask himself, should I have converted that traditional IRA to a Roth first before I did this investment. So all really nice things to think about. Either way, you're getting tax benefits because all the growth is tax deferred. When they sold this property, they paid 0 capital gains tax on the sale. So all the profit can be used to roll over to the next investment. So that's just a little idea on how it would actually look. If you've got questions, again, email us. And then I'm going to wrap up here and just remember key points to remember from this presentation. And I hope you guys enjoyed this. Let us know if you enjoyed it. By the way, tell us if there's different subjects you want us to cover. We are completely open to covering things that is more tangible to you guys as the viewers. This is not so much for us, but it is for you guys. So let us know in the comments what other subjects you'd like to hear. But in this presentation, just to wrap it up, remember, IRAs and 401ks can own any asset outside of collectibles and life insurance. You just have to find a custodian willing to administrate the assets on your behalf. So we administrate alternative assets. Fidelity's, Charles Schwab's administrate traditional assets. Be mindful of prohibited transaction rules, who your IRA can and cannot do business with. Okay. Self-directed IRAs allow the account holder to choose their own investments. So you are in full control. This is not control like I'm picking my mutual fund. This is control from beginning to end. You're picking the actual investment because we're not going to sell you any investments. IRAs can own real estate or loans secured by real estate, which is a great tangible investment that's not going anywhere. Okay. And IRAs are a great source of private capital. So if you're looking to raise money, realize there's $30 trillion in retirement accounts. About $10 trillion of that is in IRAs. It's the largest source of American wealth. So you can tap into these IRAs as a source of private capital if the clients have self-directed IRAs that allow them to direct their investments to you, the real estate investor. What's the next step? I want to actually bring somebody in. I don't know, Brian, are you on with me? I'll give you a second to kind of chime in. Brian is our sales associate here at Nuview. I think he's been on and probably answering questions. If you guys had some easy questions, he's a great resource. But I didn't know, Brian, is there any questions that you wanted to relay to me before I wrap up, or did you pretty much handle all those?
Yeah, I've got a few questions here. First question, how do I convert an existing rental property into my Roth?
So there's a couple different ways I'd answer that. So if you own a rental property personally, so it's owned, invested in your personal name, there's just no way to get that in your IRA, because at that point you're self-dealing. So anything you own personally just has to stay outside of your IRA. There's just no way, ifs, ands, or buts about that. But if your IRA is sitting there in cash, or you want to go buy new property, that's definitely allowed. And if you don't have a ton of money in your IRA, don't worry, there's a ton of strategies that allow you to buy property with very little money. You don't even need all cash. As we mentioned, Greg mentioned, he's got loans for IRA. So if your IRA needs to borrow money to buy property, that's an option. If your IRA wants to buy a property on terms, or seller financing is basically what they call it. I've had some great case studies, which we'll do on some of the subsequent webinars here, that talk about seller financing. Buying property subject to the underlying financing on the property. There's a lot of different creative ways you can buy real estate with not a lot of money, but unfortunately you can't put personal property you own and dump it into your IRA, because that would be self-dealing.
Okay. I have another question here. This is a good one. Are stepchildren or ex-spouses considered disqualified parties?
It depends. So with disqualified people, there's always going to be this gray area as to are they a fiduciary to your plan? That's really what it comes down to, right? Who is and what is a fiduciary? A fiduciary is somebody that has an obligation to act in the best interest of a principal, or in this case, an IRA. Okay. Obviously, me as the IRA owner, I have to act as in the best interest of my IRA because it's my IRA. A spouse, if we're married, also acts in the best interest of my IRA because potentially she would be the one that would inherit it. Same with my kids. When you have ex-spouses, well, then you break that tie of marriage. So you just have to ask yourself, are you still leaving the IRA to the ex-spouse? Or have you moved on and you have a new spouse where now the ex-spouse is no longer a disqualified person, your new spouse would be. So it really has to do with your relationship and how that works out, and whether or not that individual is a fiduciary to your plan. And it would go the same way for stepchildren, even though they're not your children by, bloodline. Okay, stepchildren, are they listed as a beneficiary on your plan? Typically, that's the easiest way to find that out. If they're not on that list that I mentioned, if they're outside of the list, but they're listed as a beneficiary of the plan, they automatically become a disqualified person. So I'll give you an example. So I'm not married, I don't have kids. So who's the beneficiary of my IRAs? It's actually my brother. Right? Don't tell him that because he might try to knock me off. And no, I'm just kidding. He wouldn't do that. But even though brothers are not disqualified people, because my brother is the beneficiary of my account, he automatically becomes a fiduciary and automatically a disqualified person. So when it comes to stepchildren and relatives that come in, via marriage, it's all about, are they going to inherit it? Are they a fiduciary?
Okay, interesting. Let's see, the next question here. Please clarify what it means by local RIA.
So a local RIA stands for Real Estate Investor Association. So a lot of times you can find these by just typing in your city and type RIA right after it. You can find a lot of those with a simple Google search. A lot of them have meetups, so you can go to meetup.com. That's another way to find your local RIAs. But if you just go on Google, type in your city and type in RIA, a lot of times local ones will pop up. I will say too, if you're not, if you're not trying to go outside, and because a lot of RIAs are not meeting due to the pandemic and whatnot, there's a lot of RIAs that are doing stuff online. So if you go to, if you've got a Facebook account, search the groups in your area that are real estate groups. There are tons and tons of real estate groups that are out there, some with 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 members who communicate and talk. And oftentimes one of the subjects that they do talk about is self-directed IRA. So there's a lot of resources out there for you. A lot of it's online. And, as we get back to doing more stuff live, you'll start to see some of these RIAs pop back online as, it becomes safe to do so.
All right. Thanks, Nate. A few more questions here. Will the recording be sent out to everyone?
Absolutely not. Just kidding. No, yes, they will be. You'll get a follow-up email. And then Grace, an email in a week or something. Is that how it works? So you'll get a follow-up email with the promo that I'm going to give here in a second. And then you also have an email in a week giving you the recording. So you can revert back to that.
Awesome. Okay. How can I put my self-directed IRA property owned by my business? Oh, okay. So I think they already own a property in their business, but they want it in a self-directed IRA.
Same thing. If it's owned by you or owned by your business, it's still an extension of yourself. So you can't dump property you currently own in your IRA, unfortunately, because that's self-dealing. But your IRA can go out and buy property from other non-disqualified people. So, and here's the other thing. If you've got property you want to dump, okay, and you can't find a buyer, and you can't sell it to your IRA, do you know somebody that's not disqualified to your IRA that does have an IRA that would buy it, or disqualified to you and has an IRA? So does your brother have an IRA and you want to sell your house to your brother? Could you do that? Yeah, you could sell your own personal house or a house you own as an investment to your brother's IRA, but you can't sell it to your own IRA just because you're a disqualified person.
And that same qualification, even if it's owned in an LLC, and
even
not,
if an LLC is not a magic washing machine that makes that stuff go away. You're still the beneficial owner of the LLC or managing member. So it's still an extension of yourself. So unfortunately, yeah, the LLC doesn't protect you or allow you to skate the rules with IRAs. But again, good to know who your IRA can and can't do business with. Here's what I often see, especially at local RIAs. You might have 4 or 5 investors that all have IRAs and they're all, doing off-market deals. Okay. Personally, they might own those deals in their LLC. Often you'll see that. Okay. If you've got 4 or 5 people that are not disqualified to one another, and let's just say it's me, Brian, and Grace. Okay. I got Brian here in front of me. I got Grace here to my left. We're all part of the RIA. We all are real estate investors. We all have IRAs. If my IRA wanted to buy a property from Brian, I can do that because Brian's not a disqualified person to me. Okay. If Brian's IRA wanted to buy a property from Grace, he can do that because they're not disqualified to one another. And if Grace wanted to buy a property from my IRA, she could do that because she's not disqualified to me. So we call that having financial friends, getting out there and networking. And this is key to self-directed IRAs because it's a little bit entrepreneurial. You have to build some relationships and have what I call access to deals. You don't have to have the deals yourself, but access to deals. Joining your local RIA will help you have access to deals, right? Looking at the Facebook groups that do off-market deals, that will give you access to deals. So as long as you have access to deals, you can find investments for your IRA. Just beware, you can't self-deal with your IRA or do deals with yourself. Any other questions?
One last question. What is the contribution deadline for the education savings accounts?
Good question. So the contribution deadline for the ESA and the HSA, Education Savings Account and Health Savings Account, is your tax filing deadline. So for most of us, it's now May 15th. Okay. If you are in a disaster area, I think that's even, you can go out to June 15th, right? I'm not a CPA, so double check. But it is the same deadline as your traditional and Roth deadline. It's your tax filing deadline, no extensions.
No extension.
So that's good though, but that's a good question though, because I think I know what that person's thinking. How can I sneak in a 2020 contribution? Can I do it before May 15th? The answer is yes. And you can also make a 2021 contribution too. So if you're looking to make investments right away, you can throw 2020 and 2021 in the same check even. Just make sure you designate that we're doing 2 years there. But that's a great way to double fund. That's not a real word, but double fund an IRA, because you can make last year and this year's contribution in the time before the tax filing deadline.
Yeah, that's a great point.
All right. So I'm going to wrap it up. And any other questions we can, oh, you got one more? Go ahead.
Yeah, one more that popped in as you were answering that last one. What are good resources for promissory notes?
Ooh, that's a good one. Good resources for promissory notes. So there's different promissory notes. If you're creating notes, like I like to do, that's where I'm meeting a local investor. You know, I've done some due diligence on them. They've got a good track record. I'm meeting them a lot of times through events like this or local RIAs. Okay, that's how I would find access to somebody that I would create a note for. If you're buying existing notes, there's a ton of different avenues you can go with this. I'm restricted on really promoting anybody or any sources, but I will say there's a lot of people that are doing some coaching and some education on this who are actual active note buyers. We have a guest coming on, not next week, but the week after, that is going to be talking about that specifically. I believe they are a resource to finding existing notes, whether those are performing or non-performing. And we're going to be talking about how to do the due diligence on those. So, you know, I want to answer the question in the right way without giving you too much information, but I do want to kind of throw the hook out there too, that we're going to have that topic specifically in 2 weeks. So if you're interested in learning more about note investments in general, that's going to be next Wednesday, a week from today. And then the following week, right after that, I'm going to have a special guest on who's going to talk about note due diligence on existing accounts. And we'll probably dive right into that. Where do you find these existing notes? All right. All right. So I'm going to move on here and just wrap it up with just some upcoming events. I kind of mentioned this. If you guys are interested in getting some notifications and alerts to our next classes, jump on our website, go to our Facebook page, go to our YouTube page. You can either follow us, subscribe, or just go to our website and register for these events coming up in May. We'll have the release of the June events coming out pretty shortly as well. So these would be your online events in May. And then live events. We are getting back to live events, and we are making sure that we do these safely. And again, these are for those of you who want to come out and do some live networking and education with social distancing, obviously. We are partnering up with Go RIA, local RIA here in Central Florida. They're providing a class here. They're sponsoring it. We're going to host it here at our Nuview offices in Longwood. Anybody can attend this, but this would be a live educational event. We'll also stream it live, but you get an ancillary benefit of actually meeting local real estate investors. So if you're looking for access to deals, sometimes it's best to meet these people live. And that's going to be June 9th. We're going to do 2 topics in one. We're going to talk about funding real estate deals with tax-free dollars. How to buy and sell real estate in an IRA will be the first half. And then the second half will how to lend and borrow from IRA. So it's going to really cover everything. Buying and selling real estate if you're looking to buy and sell real estate with your IRA, or if you're looking to be more passive or raise money from other people's IRAs, we're going to talk about the passive note investing strategy that I like to talk about. And then we also have a live event for clients and non-clients, but we're calling it Networking with Nuview. That's going to be from 6 to 8 p.m. on the 23rd. Grace, where are we having that? The Science Center, Orlando Science Center. So these are events that you can register for. These will be your live events. And as a reminder, these are your webinars. So a lot of stuff coming from Nuview. We're going to keep this going and keep this ball rolling. And I hope this is helpful to you guys because it's free, right? So here's a special offer I want to give to you guys. Hopefully this, made a lot of sense and at least got you guys either clearing up some confusion as to what the self-directed IRA is, how they work, or if you just want to talk a little bit more about it. myself and Brian will be available. If you want to email info@nuviewtrust.com, here's what you email. I want my free account. Just say that, leave your phone number and your email address. Obviously, the email address will be there, and we'll reach back out to you. And basically, the first 10 people that respond, I want my free account, we're going to allow you to open as many self-directed IRAs as you want for you, spouse, and dependents, and we'll waive the application cost. So it can save you, unlimited amount of money depending on how much accounts you open up. But we're going to offer that to the first 10 people that email info@nuviewtrust.com and just say, I want my free account. And we'll reach back out to you and we'll reserve your spot. Or you can call us directly, ask for Brian at 407-708-1853. So I hope this was helpful to you guys. That is the end of my presentation. Be sure to stick with us. I'll see you guys next Wednesday and hope to talk to you guys soon. And let's try to save you guys some taxes.